You've heard the term GDP thrown around all the time, right? On the news and articles. But what does it actually mean? Well, we're going to break it all down. And believe it or not, we'll do it with a really simple story. I mean, think about it. How on earth do you measure a whole country's economy? It sounds impossible, doesn't it? Trying to boil down everything, all the businesses, all the services, into just one number? It seems super complicated. But here's the secret. The basic idea behind it is actually surprisingly simple. So to really get a handle on this, we're going to skip the confusing charts and spreadsheets for now. Instead, we're going to zoom way, way in. We're going to shrink the entire global economy down to something we can all understand, a story. So let me introduce you to a little village called Anandpur. Now, it's a fictional place, but this tiny village holds the key to understanding that huge, complex question. If you can understand how Anandpur's economy works, you'll get exactly how a whole country's economy is measured. Ready? Okay, so first up in Anandpur, there's a person who runs a tea shop. You know the scene, busy every day, making chai, serving folks, just running their little business. So let's say after a whole year of selling tons and tons of tea, the total value of all their sales adds up to 1 lakh rupees. Not bad, a really solid year's work. All right, who's next? We've got the village farmer. This person's out there working the land, planting, harvesting, basically growing the food that feeds everyone else. And when we look at their year, the total value of all the crops they sold comes to 2 lakh rupees. Wow. So you can see the farm is a huge part of this little village economy. Then we have our third villager, a tailor. Super important job, right? They're stitching new clothes, mending old ones for everybody in Anandpur. And over that same year, the total value of all their work, all the clothes they've stitched, comes to 50,000 rupees. And last but not least, we've got a vegetable seller. They're the one bringing all that fresh produce from the farm right into the village market for everyone to buy. And just like our tailor, their total sales for the year also add up to 50,000 rupees. Okay, so that's our crew. Those are the 4 main producers in our little village of Anandpur. Now this is where it gets interesting. The village head starts to wonder, how much did our entire village actually produce this year? And you know what? To figure that out, all we need is some super simple math. So let's do it together. We take the 1 lakh from the tea shop, then we add the 2 lakhs from the farmer, plus the 50,000 from the tailor, and finally, we add the 50,000 from the vegetable seller. And what does that give us? Boom! 4 lakh rupees. That one number, 4 lakh rupees, represents the total value of everything produced and sold in the entire village of Anandpur for 1 whole year. And, believe it or not, you just calculated GDP. That's it, gross domestic product. It's just the total value of all final goods and services produced. Now that word final is pretty important. It just means we count the finished product, like the cup of tea that's actually sold, not the tea leaves the shopwearer had to buy to make it. See what I mean? We count the finished clothes, not the thread the tailor used. What we just did for this tiny village is exactly the same idea that economists use for entire countries. Okay, so we've got a handle on Anandpur's economy. Now let's zoom back out and connect these simple dots to the real world. You can see how it all lines up, right? Our village, Anandpur, that's like a country. The tea, the crops, the clothes, those are all the goods and services. The 1 year we looked at, that's the time period. And that grand total we came up with, well, that is the gross domestic product, the GDP. It's a perfect one-to-one analogy. All right, so we can calculate this big number. But so what? Why should we care? Why do we hear about GDP on the news constantly? The reason is pretty simple. It's like a quick health check for the economy. It gives us a snapshot of how things are going. Just imagine next year in Anandpur, things are really taking off. Maybe a couple of new businesses opened up, or the farmer had an amazing harvest. The total value of everything they produce jumps from 4 lakhs to 6 lakh rupees. That jump, that is what we call economic growth. It's pretty straightforward. When GDP goes up, it usually means the economy's growing. More stuff is being made, more services are being provided, people are generally earning more, and hopefully life is improving. But if GDP goes down, it means the economy's shrinking, and that can mean less income and a lot more financial struggle for everyday people. But, and this is a really important but, GDP does not tell us the whole story, not even close.
It's a useful tool for sure, but it has some massive blind spots that you absolutely have to know about.
A great way to think about it is this. GDP measures the total size of the economic pie. That's it. What it doesn't tell you is how that pie is sliced up. Is one person in the village getting a giant slice while everyone else just gets the crumbs? GDP has no idea. It doesn't tell us anything about inequality, and it definitely doesn't measure whether people are happy or healthy. So look, if you only remember one thing from all this, let it be this simple idea. GDP is basically just adding up everything a country makes and sells in a single year. That's all it is. It's a way to see just how big its economy is.
And that leaves us with a really big question to chew on. We've got a pretty good way to measure the size of an economy. But if what we really want to know is whether people are doing well, whether they are thriving, then what else should we be measuring? That's the real challenge, isn't it?